All right, can you all hear me? Thumbs up? Yeah, no? Cool. So the topic today is about technology as requested by Azur. But this is not always about how technology affects the practice of our religion. We already know that. We're all sharing Laylatul Qadr here on Zoom. And also that topic is boring. Reason number 2, I ordered this electronic tasbih online and it's stuck in customs, so I can't talk about it yet because I don't have it. So I'll just stick to my old tasbih for now because I can't use technology to practice my religion. Let's start, as all wise do, with the words of Hazrat Imam. This is from the Diamond Jubilee Faramin in Toronto. So in this presentation, I'm not going to give you all of the answers, and hopefully I'll be opening up more questions than I'm answering. But like Hazrat Imam is saying here, we have this dimension of human intellect, which I'm hoping to use today. But inshallah, we'll be able to go beyond the human intellect into our own understandings of the divine and also of our faith and how we relate to it through the frame of technology. So to understand how we use technology, we must first understand ourselves. To understand ourselves, we must first understand the soul. So what is the soul? I don't know what it is, so I'm going to turn to an old dead guy. But before I do that, just some semantics. Soul and intellect are often used interchangeably in Isma'ili literature. It was, at least in the beginning, and it is today, but there was a period in Isma'ili literature where the terms soul and intellect meant different things. So depending on your interpretation, they are the same thing, but the words themselves meant different things. So I'm going to just ignore that time in Isma'ili history, and all my sources are either before the peers or during Hazrat Imam's time. So Abu Yaqub alSijistani was an Isma'ili scholar. He's translated a lot by the IAS now, and he defined the soul as a piece of God coming from God, something that God has put into us along with the creation of Adam. The souls are not physical things. They don't have substance, but all souls are substantially the same. They're made out of the same stuff, even though there's no stuff there. And then, of course, they return to God. He also described how souls can grow. The soul of an individual can grow within the universal soul. The universal soul is what alSijistani referred to as Allah, the universal soul. So our individual souls can grow into this sort of collective. And they grow by interacting with other souls, which I'll explain in just a minute, and interacting with what alSijistani calls truths. They could also be grown by magic, but that's not really part of this presentation. So Rumi describes the soul by saying, "You are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop." And this is sort of reflective of how our soul is not only a piece of Allah, but the entirety of Allah is contained within us as well. So let's look at what alSijistani refers to as truths. And we have to look at the Quran for this. And we gave them signs in which there was a clear trial. And we did not create the heavens and earth and that between them in play. We did not create them except in truth, but most of them do not know. So this is saying, and as we discussed earlier, when the Quran is referring to Allah in the first person, they use the first person plural. So we is Allah. Allah did not create the heavens and the earth just for fun. He created them with truth or in truth. So when alSijistani refers to interacting with truths, he's talking about Allah's creation. So we can grow our soul by interacting with other souls and by interacting directly or indirectly with Allah's creation. And also magic, again, not the topic of this. And the topic of this talk today is I/O. If you work in computers, in computer programming, in tech, in web, you are probably familiar with the term I/O. If you are not, it stands for input, output. Very simply put, computers have input devices, your mouse, your webcam, your microphone, your keyboard, where humans interact and they input information into the computer. The computer then processes that information and then has an output. So a visual that you see on your screen or something coming through your speakers or some other output. So input, process, and then output. And according to his historical Isma'ili scholars, humans work the same way. So they also have an input. We have our five senses. We input information by touch, by seeing it, by hearing it, by smelling it, by tasting it. We process that information inside of ourselves, and then we have our output. Our output is what we say to others. It's our actions. It's what we write. It's what we create. That's our output. So just like computers, humans have the input, the processing, and the output. So these scholars argued that it's not the human body itself that does the processing, even though we can see with science today that it's the nerves and all those things. They would argue that it's our soul that does the processing. Nasir Tusi, a 14th century scholar, described the soul as interpenetrative of the body. So it receives the physical inputs from the physical senses, and it displays these physical outputs using the body as its guide. The soul is very similar to computer programming. Both are non-physical entities. We don't know how big they are. We don't know how much they weigh. They don't take up space. And the input and output is limited by the physical body that our soul is in, just like the input and output is limited by the parameters of the computer. And of course, the soul cannot be separated from the body without destroying one or both, just like the programming cannot be separated from the computer without, of course, destroying the computer, which I learned recently and lost a lot of money in the process. But it's the second point that I want to focus on, is that because when we think of the soul and when we listen to Hazrat Imam talk about the soul, he says the soul is infinite. The soul goes on forever. The body is limited. So how can the body be limiting of the soul? So Nasir Tusi, the 14th century scholar, describes this as well. And he says that the soul is not limited by the body, but the expression of the soul, the input and the output of the soul is limited by the body. So Nasir Tusi was a fan of biological evolution through natural selection. He's even cited in Charles Darwin's text about it, even though this was 600 years before Charles Darwin. And he classified the soul into multiple hierarchical categories. So at the bottom, you have inanimate objects that have no soul. Then you have plants or basic life forms that have what he called the vegetable soul. Then animals. And he had different, and it goes all the way up from there, and he had different ways of classifying these. So objects with no soul are completely subject to their environment. If you have a rock, for instance, if you throw the rock will be thrown. If you drop the rock will be dropped. The rock doesn't have any autonomy over its own life. Then you have the vegetable soul. So we would classify bacteria all the way up to plants. And these exist on a spectrum as well. They have the ability to grow. They have the ability to metabolize, and they have the ability to reproduce, but they're also subject to their environment. Animals, they can grow, they can metabolize, they can reproduce, but they can also go towards and away, towards good things and away from bad things, what we call today fight or flight. And humans have something above the animals. I'm sure there's a few all-wises today already in the programming who talked about the special something that humans have, as well as the fight or flight that the animals have, the growth, metabolism, and reproduction that the vegetables have. And we're also subject to our environments. If we get hit by a car, we get hit by a car. There's nothing in our soul that can save us from that. Above that, Nasir Tusi classified the angelic soul, which at the low end has angels, and at the high end has the prophets. And he had some Quranic evidence for putting the prophets above the angels and putting both above the humans. And they have, in addition to everything that we have, they also have divine intervention. They have direct communication with the divine. And as we just said in our tasbih, Allahu Samad, Allah, or the universal soul, has self-sufficiency. It is not subject to its environment at all, whereas everything below Allah is subject to the environment. Why is Allah not subject to the environment? Because it creates the environment. It has control over the environment. So how do we know where we fit into this hierarchy? Well, we have to, again, turn to the Quran, as all these scholars did. So the Quran says, and we, again referring to Allah, and Allah has certainly honored the children of Adam, that's us, and carried them on the land and sea and provided them of the good things and preferred them over much of what we have created with definite preference. So we are the preferred ones, according to the Quran, but not the best. We're not the top of the tier. We're near the top. We're better than most things, but not all things that Allah has created. So what is that something that puts us where we are in the hierarchy? Is it our ability to rationalize? Is it our reason? Lots of philosophers had argued that humans can think about how they think, and no other animal can do that. Do we know it for sure? No, but we like to think that we think harder than all the other animals. Is it our morality and free will? We can choose between right and wrong. Well, can animals choose between right and wrong? Again, we don't know. Is it our accountability to the divine? If you've recently read Volume 4, they go through the story of the debate between the animals and the humans, and the way that the humans win the argument saying that they're the favorite is because they are accountable to God, whereas the animals are not. But is that really true? Are we the appointed custodians of creation? Is it our responsibility as humans to take care of the environment, or is that something for all of life? I'm going to argue that what makes us different is communication. So what is communication? It's sharing or imparting knowledge. And when you share or impart knowledge, it's an interaction between intellects. It's an interaction between souls. So if we look at alSijistani again, how do you grow your soul? You interact with other souls. You have to communicate to grow your soul. I know what you're thinking. Everybody communicates, right? We have the coronavirus going on that communicates with the immune cells in our body to a certain extent. If you guys go out and mow the lawn, I'm sorry, Calgarians, you can't do that too often. The smell of fresh cut grass is actually chemicals that the grass releases to warn other grass of danger coming in. So that's a way of communicating through chemical reactions. Bumblebees, famously, they dance to share their directions to the hive or directions to nearby flowers. Whales communicate with audio. They communicate auditorily. Humans, we do all that too, but there's something else, right? And then again, the prophets and the angels, they have their divine inspiration, right? In the American broadcast earlier today, and also in Khalil Andani's presentation a few days ago, if you guys attended that, he talked about how the Quran was not revealed through auditory words, but rather inspired in Muhammad. So that's something that the prophets and the angels have access to, that inspiration that us humans and below don't have access to. So what is this something that makes us communicate different from all of the other creation? Well, that simply is communication technology, or tools that are used to share and create and store information. So this are extra tools outside of our body, outside of animate objects, outside of life, that assist in the interaction of intellects, that assist in the interaction of souls. Things outside of life that we can use to grow our souls. That's what technology is, or specifically communication technology is. And we have a long history of communication technology, going back 44,000 years ago to see the first cave paintings. They were recently found in France of handprints on a cave wall used to tell stories, all the way up to just 13 years ago releasing the iPhone. And this is something that is unique to humans in the entire world as we know it. No other creature below us on Nasir and Tusi's hierarchy uses communication technology. They can use some technology, but it's usually with human assistance, and they don't use technology to communicate with each other. But it's also unique to us above the hierarchy as well. So while prophets and angels and the divine have the ability to use communication technology, they choose not to. And we can see this in the Quran as well, in Surah 6, Ayah 7, where the Quran says, "And even if we had sent down to you, O Muhammad, a written scripture on a page, and they touched it with their hands," the disbelievers would say, "This is not but obvious magic." And this is in a time where magic is heavily frowned upon. In the Quran, believing in magic is just as bad as drinking and gambling. It's in the same chapter. And this is describing why Allah sent a human to spread a word or to spread a message. Instead of sending a book or an angel or a miracle, he sent a human. So while the divine can create a written scripture on page, they chose not to. So this communication technology is really specific just to humans when we look at all of life as we know it. So how do we use technology? Think about how you use technology. You can fall asleep in front of your Zoom Jamaat Khana like my brother is doing, or you can just sit down on your phone and scroll through Instagram, scroll through TikTok, scroll through Twitter. Or if you're, our parents' generation, you can use technology mainly for conspiracy theories and Candy Crush, right? These are all ways in which we use the technology that we have. So now let's bring it back to today. Let's bring it back to Laylatul Qadr. I'm sure you've heard the story a million times. Dude goes to a mountain, goes to a cave, talks to an angel. It's fine. We know. What did that angel say? Well, in Surah 96 of the Quran, we say, Iqra, in the name of your Lord who created man from a clump. Iqra, and your Lord is most generous, who taught by the pen, taught man that by which he knew not. And I chose on purpose not to translate the word Iqra yet. And I think you might know where I'm going with this. Because Iqra has two meanings. It means read, but it also means recite. So if we look at the IO of the human, we have the input, which is reading. We gain information by reading it. And we have the output, which is recite. We can output the information that we process or that we learn by reciting it. So we have the balance of the input and the output. In the first word of Islam has both the input and the output. And it has the balance of the input and output. So what do we think about when we think of balance? We usually think of balance between good and dunya, like Imam says, or we think of balance between good and evil. But think about the balance between good and evil real quick, right? On one side, you have the good. On the other side, you have the evil. Do you really want to balance that? I don't think so. I think we want to go all the way to the good, right? One side is good, one side is bad. Same with din and dunya. When we talk about it in Khana, we rush all the way to the din side. And then as soon as we're outside of Jamaat Khana, we rush all the way to the dunya side. There's no balance there, right? So how do we balance these things? We need to look at what the Quran says about Sirat al-Mustaqim. So Allah said, this is after the creation of Adam. He commanded the angels to bow down to Hazrat Adam, and Iblis refused. So Allah said to Iblis, what prevented you from prostrating when I commanded you? And Satan said, I am better than him. I'm better than Adam. You created me from fire and you created Adam from clay. So God cast him out of heaven. I'm summarizing there. And Satan said, because you have put me in error, I will surely sit in wait for them, for humans, on your straight path, on Siratika al-Mustaqim. Then I will come for them, from before them, from behind them, and on their right and on their left, and you will not find most of them grateful to you. Right? So what the Quran is saying is that it's not evil on one side and and good on the other side, right? It's evil on both sides, evil on all sides, and good somewhere in the middle. So how do we balance this? Well, Nasir and Tusi said, how do you have good in the middle and evil on either side? So the way he defined it is by having too much and too little. Right? That's where the evil is. The evil is in having too much or too little. So think about it. If you sleep, for example, if you have too much sleep, that's bad. If you have too little sleep, that's also bad, right? The right amount of sleep is somewhere in the middle. If you eat too much, that's bad. If you eat too little, that's bad. The right amount of eating is somewhere in the middle. If you pray too much to the point where you forsake your other obligations that you have as a human, that's bad. But if you pray too little to the point where you forget the divine entirely, that's also bad, right? So you need to be somewhere in the middle, right? But we also need to balance our inputs and our outputs, right? If we take in too much, but we don't give enough, that's bad. But if we give too much and we don't take enough, that's also bad. And we can see this when Hazrat Imam gives his Faramin. So I'll look at the Islamabad Diamond Jubilee Faraman. So what Hazrat Imam is saying here is that our input is massive. We're inputting all this knowledge into us as the Jamaat, but our output is lacking. It's not balanced. We need to share the knowledge more. We need to share the competencies more. We need to output more to offset the input and balance it all out. Right? This is talking about knowledge. He also does the same thing when he's talking about prayer. And he said in 1978, so here we have the opposite. We're saying our dua 3 times a day. The output is there. We have massive output, right? We're teaching our children the dua. We have the output, but we don't know enough about it. We're not learning enough about it, right? The input is not there. So we need to raise the input to balance out the input and the output. This is what Hazrat Imam is telling us. And for those of you who come to this circle dua regularly, you might recognize this farman as the one that we read 2 days ago, because I do not have access to a lot of farmans. So when we look at how we use technology and how to balance technology, we have to come to the understanding that our technology that we use today is not designed to be balanced. It is not designed to be balanced. That's something that we need to do. How is it not designed to be balanced? Well, let's go back in time to a psychologist named B.F. Skinner, who created a Skinner box. Named it after himself, they didn't skin anyone, that's his name. Inside this box, he put a bird and a button. When the bird pushed the button, the bird would get food. So the learned behavior, or the operant conditioning as it's called now, is when the bird got hungry, they would push the button, get some food, eat some food, go back to their bird business. Anytime the bird was hungry, it would go push the button, but if the bird wasn't hungry, the bird wouldn't push the button. Then they changed it up a little bit. And they decided that when the bird pushed the button, maybe the bird would get food. It was completely random whether or not the bird got food when they pushed the button. And the behavior that they saw in the bird is that the bird would constantly push the button. At every opportunity it had to push the button, it would always push the button in the hopes that it might get food. And this is what we see in people with gambling behaviors. Remember, we're on the same spectrum of the expression of the soul as animals. So if an animal shows off a trait, we might also have that trait, and this is one that we share, right? So we see this in our technology today, right? In social media, you have what's called the infinite scroll. If you go on Twitter, if you go on Instagram, if you go on TikTok, whatever, you can always scroll. There's always something more, right? That's the same as the bird pushing the button in hopes that you'll see something that gives you that dose of dopamine, and you like it, and you click the like button, and then you keep scroll as much as you can until you get to the next piece of bird food, right? Same thing with notifications. Every time your phone rings, you get excited, or if you're me, you get terrified. What if it's a good thing? What if it's a bad thing? And you need to check it. It's appealing to your emotions, your animal emotions, right? If you play a lot of online gaming, they have the same structures in there to keep you coming back more and more and more. The example that I have is when I first started playing World of Warcraft, I had to get 3 wolf bones to make a potion. So I thought it was easy. Kill a wolf, take 3 of its bones, then I'm done. But because they use this conditioning in the game, I spent 2 weeks killing every single wolf I could find because, surprise to Akil, not all wolves have bones. And they were instead randomly placed in random wolves, just like the Skinner box. But it got me. I was addicted to that game for 2 weeks, trying to do one menial task. So the way technology is designed is not to interact with our human soul, but to bring us down to the animal soul, to bring us down to the vegetable soul, so that the only way we have of communicating is to get that dopamine hit, to get that chemical reaction, right? That's the way our technology is designed, but that's not the way that we have to interact with it. We need to bring our interactions of technology back up to our own level, right? So I'm going to look at the Faramins one more time because they're an infinite well of knowledge. Kampala, Uganda, also Diamond Jubilee, because I have the Diamond Jubilee book. That's where most of these are from. So we're on this same spectrum as all other life, from the bacteria all the way up to Allah. We're on that spectrum. But the thing that sets us apart is how we engage our human brain. So we can't let the technology that we use bring us back down to that animal level or bring us back down to that vegetable level. We have to stick on the human level. But technology isn't going anywhere. If anything, it's becoming more and more involved in our lives. It's becoming more and more necessary to our lives. We wouldn't even be able to have Lailat Qadr tonight without technology, without the Zoom conference, without all the YouTube streams, without all the WhatsApp messages sending people illegal tasbihs. The technology is becoming important in every single aspect of our waking life. For me in particular, it's important to my sleeping life. I needed to go to sleep at night. So we can't get away from technology. So how do we balance technology? If we can't balance between too little and too much, how do we balance technology? Well, we do that by balancing our input and our output. We need to balance how we use technology with our input and our output. So let's go back to Lailat Qadr real quick, right? You guys remember the story? A dude goes up to a mountain, talks to an angel, says the thing, but this time I'm highlighting a different word, created, khalaqa. And to understand the importance of this word, remember, this is the first sentence of Islam. So it's very, very important. But to understand the importance of the word khalaqa, you need to know a little bit about Arabic grammar. So in Arabic, the way that you make nouns is you have a 2 or 3 or 4 letter root. And then the way that those letters are arranged, or the letters that come in between them, define what the noun is. But all the words that share that same root have the same meaning. So for example, if you have kataba, it has to do with writing. So katabu is I wrote. Akatubu is I write, kitab is book, katib is author, maktab is desk, maktaba is library, iktitab is writing down registration. So you have that same root, all the words have the same meaning, just different noun forms. But if you look at the word that we highlighted previously, khalaqa, we have something a little bit different. So of course it has to do with creation, right? Khalaqa, I created. Khaluqu, I design or I create. Yakhluqa is create. Khalaqin is a segment of the creation. Al-Khaliq or Al-Khalaqu is the creator. Khalqi is creation. Makhluqat is also creation. But if you look at the bottom here, the last word, akhlaq, has the same root as creation, but that word means ethics. So what are the ethics of our faith if not an integral aspect of creation, right? And you need to understand that Arabic has not always existed the way it does today. After the Quran was written, Caliph Abdul Malik of the Umayyad Empire looked at the Quran and said, this is Arabic now. Forget all the Arabic that you knew before this. This is Arabic now, right? So when we look at these grammatical forms, these are coming, even the grammar of Arabic itself is coming straight from the Quran, is coming straight from Allah, right? So Allah has intended that our ethics are an integral part of creation. So when we're using technology to grow our souls, when we're using technology ethically, we need to use it to create. So use your intellects to balance your input and output. If you're inputting something, you need to output it as well. So this is my YouTube channel, my second Instagram, my TikTok, and my Twitter. I engage with all of these platforms. I consume these platforms. So I need to make sure that I'm also outputting, right? I have the input. I need to make sure that I have the output. How else can we use technology? We can use technology to engage with Allah's creation, right? The Quran says, and his signs and Allah's signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth and the diversity of their languages and your colors. Indeed, in that are signs for those who know or for those of knowledge, right? The signs of Allah are everywhere in the world, right? And we can use technology to help us access those signs. These pictures are loading very, very slowly. But you can see in this first one on the bottom left, that's a rocket ship, right? That is technology that we use to explore Allah's creation farther than we can see. The rocket ship is the tiny blue thing under the tree. It's kind of hard to make out. I was far away when I took the picture. And lastly, we can use the technology to grow our soul by engaging with other souls, right? Same part of the Quran. And his signs is that he created you from dust. Then suddenly you were human beings dispersing throughout the earth. Every other person in the world, but also every other plant, every other animal, you share a soul with. And the only way you can grow your soul is by interacting with other souls. So interact with people that you can grow with, interact with people that you can learn from to grow your soul. And you can use technology to do that. We're using technology to do that right now. So if we continue these activities, we are able to grow our soul. We are able to live ethically in this technology-centric world that we're living in today. And I'm going to finish, of course, with the words of Hazrat Imam. So what we look at Hazrat Imam is saying, equitable and, of course, balance are synonyms. So we need to be balanced in everything that we do. We need to use our intellect to make sure that we're balanced, because if we are balanced, then our souls can only grow, and they'll grow into each other and they'll grow into the universal soul. So we need to be mindful of this when we're using technology. Thank you, Yali Madat.
Hey, Akil,